Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we have Nintendo's financial information get released today for this past fiscal year, and I wanted to kind of go over that today, and we'll take a look at some of the things they said and some of the things they actually didn't say. And I've looked through all the financial information, so I'm just going to kind of go through their presentation here, so I'm not sure how long this video will end up being, but there are some things I kind of wanted to highlight, so I'm just going to go through it sequentially here. So in case you're not sure what this financial information is about, it's basically the previous year that ended this past March. But I did notice that Nintendo seemed to highlight some things that happened since then, and they usually highlight some things that are coming up for investors to get excited about. And we'll get into more of that in just a second, but we'll start here with this first information here. And that is year-on-year net sales for this fiscal year declined 5.5%. And you can see this consolidated financial highlights here and just negatives all the way down. And this is kind of what I expected to see. We've seen Switch sales slow, but when you look at things like the Famitsu sales chart, you can still see the Switch sells really well compared to other systems. So even though sales are down, they're still pretty good. And then one quick note here on the consolidated sales, you can see that dedicated video game platform sales and mobile sales are down. However, playing cards are more than doubled. And I don't really follow Nintendo's playing card industry, so I'm guessing this is mostly Pokemon related. But let me know in the comments if you're more into that, where this could be attributed to. And then one interesting bullet note here, Nintendo actually says that the impact of the exchange rate for net sales was a gain of 157.8 billion yen, which is kind of contrary to what Sony was saying was the reason why they needed to raise the price of the PlayStation 5 in certain regions. So I don't know if maybe this has something to do with where the Switch is manufactured versus the PlayStation 5. I honestly don't know where most of those units are manufactured, so let me know in the comments if you do. And Nintendo kind of highlights the reason why there's been a decrease in the profit on the Switch. And let me read through this bullet point here. Although proportion of hardware sales declined and proportion of digital sales increased, our gross profit margin declined by 0.5 percentage points year on year to 55.3%. Now this is the key part here. This was due in part to Nintendo Switch OLED model, which has a lower profit margin than the other models in the Nintendo Switch family of systems, accounting for a greater percentage of hardware sales. Chronically high material costs also had an effect. Now, I've heard some people online say that Nintendo's making a lot of money off this OLED because all they did is just slap a new screen on it and charge more for it. But that's not the case. They actually make less profit off of each one of these units. And for that reason, I don't see the price of the Switch OLED coming down anytime soon. And I'm thinking Nintendo was probably planning to lower the cost of the Switch OLED, thinking that the prices of the materials would come down over time, as what naturally happens. However, because of inflation, that's actually been the opposite. So don't expect a big Switch OLED discount and then the mainline Switch to get discounted further than that in order to boost sales. I'm going to skip over a lot of the boring stuff like operating income and exchange rates and net profit, because the summary that we've already covered goes into as much of that detail as I'm interested in. But to kind of give you an idea of what Nintendo's thinking is going to happen over the next year, we have this summary here. For the fiscal year ending March 2024, we forecast a decrease in net sales and profits due to a reduction in the unit sales of Nintendo Switch hardware and software, as well as the assumed exchange rate having an appreciated yen compared to the fiscal year ending in March 2023. Nintendo Switch has entered into its 7th year since launch, and while it will become more challenging to maintain the same sales momentum as before, our goal is to have more consumers continue to play Nintendo Switch for longer, leading to maximized sales. We aim to achieve this by maintaining high user engagement and conveying the appeal of not only new software titles, but also titles released in previous years. Now, I've already seen a lot of reports that this indicates Nintendo will not have any new hardware this year. However, they don't say that, so don't hear something that Nintendo doesn't say. You have to look real carefully and kind of read between the lines with what they say to their investors, because they're not going to flat out lie to them. Now, when it comes to the public, they may say, oh, we have no new hardware or no new software of this title coming out, and then a week later announce it, as they have done in the past. All Nintendo says here is that they want to maintain the same sales momentum as before and to maximize sales. Now, they could do that with, say, a Switch 2 coming out and you have cross-gen titles. And I think you'll see where I'm kind of going with this here in a minute when we start talking about the software sales for the last half of 2023. But just keep all this in the back of your mind when you read reports that say there's no new Nintendo hardware coming this fiscal year. I didn't see anywhere in here where Nintendo actually said that. And in that last statement, Nintendo said that they were going to be kind of focusing on user engagement, and you can see how that's playing out here in this set of graphs. You can see how the Switch hardware has gone down the past 2 years, but you can see annual playing users continues to go up. And on the left here, you can see how this past year, the Switch OLED hardware was the largest chunk of that hardware sales. And Nintendo did point out that that's because of these special editions like the Splatoon 3 and the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet designs. And we do have that Tears of the Kingdom one that just came out, and that's not going to be on this fiscal year, but that'll be on the next. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of these Switch OLED special editions get released this coming year in order to help boost these sales. And now we come to the part that I think most people are going to be interested in, and that's the software sales. And Nintendo is quick to point out that this is the third highest level of software sales since the launch of the Switch, but overall it's still pretty good numbers. And of course, a decline in sales is what you would start to expect in the 7th year of a console. But they kind of break down some of the different titles here and how much they've sold. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, over 20 million units. Splatoon 3, over 10 million. And Switch Sports at 9 million is pretty good. And Mario Strikers at 2 million seems kind of low to me, but I heard a lot of people were disappointed with that game, so I think it's not got the sustained evergreen title status. And the last new one listed here was Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and that's just an incredible game. If you've not tried it, I highly recommend it. And then they highlight some of their evergreen titles, and no surprise here at the top of that is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I'm sure that DLC pack has kind of helped with those sales. And next they highlight some of their digital sales, and you can see this year that sales are still on the decline from last year. And they have these broken down by download only, add-on content, and Nintendo Switch Online in one group. And then the blue area underneath, that's the downloadable versions of packaged software, so software that you can get physically. And you can see in this past fiscal year that 49.6% of software that has a physical version sold digitally. So we're pretty much 50-50 at this point between physical and digital versions of software. But then that top number, the 45.5%, that's including Switch Online, DLC, and any game that's in download only, doesn't have a physical release. And overall, the digital sales are up 12.7%. So if you were hoping we were going to escape that all-digital future, the numbers are not trending that way. And Nintendo did highlight that Metroid Prime Remastered had a higher portion of digital sales than physical. And I'm sure this is due to the fact that it sort of just shadow dropped digitally, but you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks to get the physical version. And next is the part that has legitimately concerned a lot of Switch owners, and that's examples of announced Nintendo products. So Nintendo highlights what's coming up in this fiscal year, and it's kind of slim pickings. We've got Tears of the Kingdom on May 12th, and then Pikmin 4 on July 21st. But the only other two things highlighted here is planned DLC for Pokemon and Waves 5 and 6 for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And Nintendo tries to make the best of this by saying this kind of add-on content gives consumers an incentive to continue playing a title, and also to hopefully rekindle interest in players who are taking a break from a game. But overall, I think this sort of highlights that Nintendo really doesn't have much coming up in the second half of 2023. Now, there was another area later on where they highlighted the games coming, and they did put again in there Metroid Prime 4, again with no release date. So that's just something that's eventually coming to the Switch. It may or may not be out this fiscal year. And this is part of the reason why it feels to me like Nintendo is kind of holding back for a Switch successor, in that there's just not a lot that they can announce until that hardware is announced. But then again, don't hear something that Nintendo didn't say. Obviously, this is all speculation on my part, but it seems to me like Nintendo has to have hardware out there, and that's why we're not seeing more games announced. Now, I have a feeling we'll see some smaller announcements and maybe some older titles brought back, like that Zelda Twin Pack, and maybe Metroid Prime 2 and 3. But as far as the upcoming year, I would not expect to see Mario Odyssey 2, for example, get announced for the Switch. But moving on, Nintendo wanted to highlight some things that they're doing outside of just bringing video games out. So they highlighted the success of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which, as you all probably know by now, has grossed over $1 billion worldwide. And they do say that they are looking to bring more IPs to this format. And they also highlight that Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood opened this past February, and they have an official Nintendo store that's going to open in Kyoto in October. Now, I'm not sure how much that's actually going to bring in revenue, but it's definitely something more from a PR standpoint that gets more brand recognition. I don't expect Nintendo to start opening a whole bunch of Nintendo World stores all over, kind of like Disney did with their Disney stores. I haven't seen a Disney store in a while, so I think a lot of them have shut down. And then the rest of the report just goes through a whole bunch of statistics and numbers that I'm not going to highlight all here. You can read them for yourself if you're interested in that much in-depth information. But my overall take from this, even though a lot of the sales numbers are down, they're still pretty high and Nintendo's still in pretty good shape. And something interesting that wasn't pointed out in this financial information is that the Nintendo Switch has now sold over 125 million units. And you can see here from Wikipedia where it stands as far as other systems. It's still behind the DS and the PlayStation 2. Now, in this financial information, Nintendo said that they were going to try to shoot for 15 million units sold in this fiscal year. And if they do achieve that, they still will not surpass the DS or the PlayStation 2. So unless we see like a massive price drop in the Switch that causes the sales to just skyrocket, I have a feeling the Switch is not going to pass the DS or the PlayStation 2. And that's all we have for this financial information. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that you were surprised by or if it was pretty much what you were expecting. And let me know if you think that the Nintendo Switch will pass the DS and the PlayStation 2 to become the best-selling console of all time. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. Only about 10% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, so it would help the channel out quite a bit. I want to thank you for watching, and be good.